Welcome back for those who have returned to this concluding session. My two texts that I will be reading are by the late Binyavanga Wainaina, a Kenyan author. And the first one is titled, Who Invented Truth? Who invented the piece of nonsense called truth? Tired of truth I am, and meta-narratives, and more truth, and post-colonies. An intellectual world in which each paper rewrites its own perceptual framework. Everybody is represented. Nobody is real. Sick I am of affirming stories about strong brown women, of being pounded into literary submission, patronized beyond humanity. I miss beginnings, middles, and ends. Please bring back the myths and the legends, even those ones about wise rabbits and wicked witches. Nothing is true. Pick and choose your way. And it helps that there aren't simple, direct ways to places. There are gritty things, hinges to doors we do not want to open, that we want sealed, buried under the vast amount of cow shit we are shoveling into print onto our continent. Let's have things tested again, maybe sang, like Fela did, like Nesta did. If your thing cannot fit into a song, just shut up. What is the test? Ideas aren't democratic. The value of your ideas can't be measured by how many people understand them. That is nonsense. And though they have to fit into something, a system, there's no straight lines or building blocks, only just webs, interlinks that feed themselves and lead into each other and go nowhere. Which writer on the continent has started a movement? A series of aesthetics that have influenced a generation somewhere, a movement that has burned its own fuel. I am obsessed at this point with a conversation with myself. Writing, a vain pursuit. Everywhere, boxes are imposed, responsibilities. Who is your audience? Who are you writing for? Why are you not writing in your mother tongue? Art is never for art's sake, you tell yourself. Of course it isn't, but art for art's sake is a necessary lie. Who has perfect knowledge, mastery over their imagination? I can't be, nor do I want to be, Mr. All Pan-African when I write. As a reader, I detest the contrived. I do. The writing that comes with answers before it starts to write. Hate fiction that uses a hammer to ram its message into your head. Why not sing a protest song? Fiction is about creating worlds. If you do not want to do this, go write a thesis. My country, Kenya, is 40 years old. This century, we have only had 2 seasons of national unity, both lasting a few months, independence and the 2002 elections. What many in and outside Kenya know as tribes did not exist as nations before the white man came. The contracts were different, the social arrangements were different, languages were shared and agreements and rules. Tribal self-awareness came when people needed to deal with the British in structures that the Brits could recognize and talk to. The Mijikenda, the Kalenjin, the Gikuyu, all words used in the 20th century to describe peoples who had similar lifestyles and spoke similar languages. Jomo Kenyatta took the game further when he invented a certain Gikuyu. Before he wrote Facing Mount Kenya in England, most of us known as Gikuyus could not agree on our origins, on how many clans there were. Some said we were descended from the same. Some said that Gikuyu and his wife were the first Gikuyus and that their 9 daughters formed the 9 clans. Some insisted that the clans were 13. Some said 5. His version of Gikuyuness, a mix of missionary education and the experiences of his village life, became the idea fix. Now we look to his book to find out how to perform wedding ceremonies, to settle debates. Gikuyus, once the most decentralized of decentralized communities, have become raving nationalists. They believe Kenya is their baby. They fought for it, liberated it, built it, and the rest of Kenya is intruding on what was a fine Kenyatta-designed arrangement. And how do you create a nation out of 40 or so tribes? You spend time as frenziedly as possible over 40 years building a weave of mythology strong enough to bond the pieces together, a grammar, a constitution, mottos. You fail to do this successfully, only blood creates nations. Only the risk of annihilation makes people abandon what ways they presently use to make sense of the world. But you must try to make this work. We know no other way, so we pretend it works. And we wait and see. And become born-again Christians or drunks when things take the wrong course. A Young Nation is a bad novel, contrived, trying to push an agenda that cannot persuade readers, trying to impose a tight structure that excludes all reality. The English were beaten into submission before democracy took present-day root. Tribal settlement was beaten out of them. Religion embossed in blood. The state fought and beat all comers to establish a complete monopoly of violence over its citizenry. Only then were individual freedoms possible. Yes, yes, bad medicine. Let's pray nationalism will die soon and something more gentle will come by and massage us gently to prosperity. Don't hold your breath. Uganda, my mother's country, has abandoned complex funeral rites. Kenya, more modern, Western, less Christian, still sticks to traditional funerals, sometimes mixed with Christian services. This lasts days, sometimes weeks. So many Ugandans died from AIDS in the late 80s that it became impossible to justify the expense and time to organize a proper traditional or religious ritual. Funeral. These days, somebody dies and he or she is buried the very next day. So far, everybody seems comfortable with the idea, but then you see, Uganda has done the genocide, the civil wars, all the blights that built Europe. It will do what it needs to and will make the grammar to justify it. In Kenya, we veer from ecstasy to despair. Open societies come with their stresses. Just as people held back their creative instincts in the Moi days, old unresolved hates and grudges that were in suspension for a while have risen to the surface. We have a gormless president, and without anybody selling us dreams, we hang in vacuum, and we only deal with each other at the political level in the old ethnic alliance ways, complete with emerging godfathers. To be honest, we miss the day when government was opaque, when power was centralized in one man. It is starting to seem that corruption was more manageable then. Francois Mauriac said, "There is no such thing as a novel which genuinely portrays the indetermination of human life as we know it." I wonder about this statement. It seems to me that the man is adept at fiction. We use the same rhetoric to build nations, justify wars, bond families, make marriages work, keep the attention and loyalties of our cliques. Narrated by any Kenyan, you ask, the story of Kenya will not seem different from the historical novel. Characters will rise up. There shall be titanic conflicts, climaxes and resolutions. The amalgamation of tiny incidents that actually took place are indigestible and, more importantly, dangerous. Computers are fortunate. As the software needed to get things done starts to grind down the hard drive, the body, one only needs to invest in a better computer, which can accommodate new technology. I have in mind somebody in the 1950s in sepia running at a great pace as Technicolor sweeps up behind them the story of our times. Kenyans are simply muddling along as human beings do, insisting on learning everything the hard way. We live in times where we are all associated in real time with everything that everybody in the world is doing. We are aware of the rest of the world, but we sit here in 486 computer bodies, watching a world where people speak in gigabytes. With the exception of time, as taught to us, life provides no highways. We make them, we call them habits, and these parts are often changeable, adaptable. The most stubborn of them are those highways found and drawn in our minds when we are children. Small things as solid matter we keep inside of us to protect us from facts, from the fact that we are tiny things suspended in an enormity we cannot digest or comprehend, and threats can come from any place. As a child, I learned to love novels. They took hold of me at the time that acquisition of language was important, trying to name the world and its incidents. By the age of 10, I had learned to sniff out the useless, long descriptive passages and ignore them. Take the marrow. I more or less kept up this pace. It only reduced when, in my 20s, I became infatuated by writing. So part of me is Europe, a place where man has become his own god, looking down at himself and shaking his head sadly. But because God the man and man the man are the same person, they are at an impasse. I have read too much to escape being that kind of person. So have many Africans. So have many people around the world who are fixed into their past, who cannot adapt. And people who may be seen in other times as near inhuman can take advantage of our times sublimely because they are able to blank slate themselves. They are able to change in a world where changing fast and without baggage is a mark of the hero. David Beckham. There are more successful ANC activists where those who are quickly able to shed their past and embrace Randburg and all it stands for. Nairobi is full of people born generations away from a mud hut who drive into the city every morning, cassette player blaring with motivational tapes, trying to get themselves formatted for work, life, and success. Most of the social effort where you drink, how you plan your decor, where you drink, what you talk about when you drink, all planned to fit into a template that you were not brought up in. Many, most even, are unable to blank slate themselves. They fail, and nobody has sympathy. My peers have friends they have known all their lives, but only in English. When somebody dies in one's family, your friends do not come. They do not know or want to know you in your mother tongue. that vast part of you that cannot present itself in a Nairobi bar remains yours and your family's. I wonder sometimes whether the main problem with the educated classes of our continent is simply this. We want our continent resolved in our lifetimes, and our continent is not interested. So we contort and we twist ideas around and blame and create whole new disciplines to understand and explain when maybe all that is required of us is to document, to simply document our times if we are writers. Document in the flawed way that seems true to us in our individual hearts, instead of the superimposed with that vile censorious correctedness that means nothing and does nothing and only makes middle-class Africans feel better about themselves. What matters, what will be useful, will resolve itself in its own good time. And you can be sure it won't be the literature about brown, strong women who empowered herself with human quirks. Do I know what I'm saying? No. Okay. That is the end of my first reading. The second reading from Binyavanga Wainaina is titled How to Be African. My brothers and sisters, we all know that Leo was an African, do we not? So was Tut, Cleo, and Janis Joplin. Rock and roll comes from Bamako. My brothers, I lead you to the debate held last summer in Boston. Is a grain of wheat a Eurocentric title? Why not a grain of sorghum or a grain of millet? But Brother Ashanti made the valid point that wheat is Egyptian, and in Egypt the wheat was black. For the translation of the ancient Egyptian symbol for wheat is black grain that nourishes us. We here know it all started with the royal calabash. In ancient times, the calabash became the tray, the plate, the saucer, and ultimately the Tupperware container, which comes from Guinea-Bissau, and which to this day women talk about when they say, oh, go and buy some Tupperware containers from the market, the one with the suction seal, like our ancestors loved it. We invented the wine, the bottle of wine. Look at the gourd of the Gikuyu people, used to store millet wine. My brothers and sisters, we come from great people. Look how ancient European queens wore wigs of afro, powdered white like our ancient Africanist elders and shamans. My sons and daughters, the 12 tribes of Israel are the Igbo, the Amara, the Kalenjin, the Maasai, the Baganda, the Venda, the Maasai, the Swahili, and in Swahili, Jew means up, which comes from our people pointing to Israel, where the Jews, the real Jews, come from. The Kalenjin still speak in an ancient form of Hebrew. The Tutsi were ancient Phoenicians and Greeks. No, sorry. Ancient Greeks and Phoenicians were Tutsis. The nose of the Sphinx was cut to spite us. Luo elders had the same pointy beard as King Tut. Have you heard about the Black Irish? Jesus was African, you know. We invented coffee. All of us, every single one of us, is a descendant from kings and queens. We all wore kaftans of gold and wraparound headscarves woven out of genuine Erica Badu. Africa had no peasants. Pushkin's father was from Cameroon. Alexandre Dumas's mother was a black woman from Martinique. She did not call herself black, but what does she know? My brothers and sisters, we need to talk about Angelina Jolie. Look at the syntax of her lips. the linguistics of the adoptions. Notice the grammatical arrangement of the sarong. The Nefertiti knows she is African. All of this information can be found in the great African literary library of Alexandria, which burnt down. My son, my daughter, vault yourself to esteem through these maybes, these almost becomes. Create whole university departments of rejoiners. Take ownership of all empires. Now, my brothers, a Dr. Brace of the University of Michigan tells us that Nubians and Egyptians were not Black Africans. He says they had black skins and Danish craniums. And it is indeed the cranium that makes the European. We are told that their skin eventually adapted to the harsh rigors of the tropical sun. They will find an Aryan in a toenail. Professor Kwame Tut and Dr. Nefertiti Dakar have agreed to draft a strategy to counter this. And at our next gathering, again at the Quintachino Chipotle Coffee Bar in Brooklyn, we will discuss this further. That was an excerpt from Binyavanga Wainaina, How to Become African. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today, which was our second day of our Radical Solidarity Summit. Please do join us again tomorrow. Tomorrow's theme is on collectivity and collaboration as radical practice. And this will begin at 4 p.m. South African time. Our lineup will include a panel discussion with Ron Grupa, Diana Campbell-Betancourt, Bonaventure Soy Bejin Dikung, Marie-Helene Pereira, and this will be moderated by Tammy Langtree. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.